I think I agree to what Vinay is talking about, but as a trend, because I don't think there's any trend in India.
Okay.
Every family is unique, is equally confused, is equally demanding, and it also depends on the stage or the quantum of wealth that you're at the end of the day looking at. A family with 500 crores behaves very differently than somebody who's at 5,000 crores. The dynamics change dramatically, and to be honest. Unlike what most people who service this tribe think, it's not the know-how on the product that's important. Families are not interested in differentiating between a product that gives 18% or another which gives 19%. I mean, to a guy with 500 crores, it really doesn't make such a big difference all the time. But it's more important that you spend time on understanding the family itself. And if you do that, only then you can service them in a way which is much more aligned to their expectation. Because for 500 crores, you'll make enough mistakes, you'll have great alpha generation strategies, you'll have smart betas, and to be honest, the trade needs to rethink on what effort goes into understanding the families themselves. And I can tell you, the presentation that Mr. Javeri made, I mean, Wealthex has done a tremendous amount of work in researching these families to the last detail. If you see their dossiers, that tells you that that's the extent of KYC you need to know. But I think we're still a long way to go to reach that as a practice, but we're heading there, hopefully.
Just to address your question, I'm not sure I agree with the statement that, that it's done differently in the West here.
Okay.
I just think that the broader message is no one size fits all. I'm well aware and familiar with, in the US, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who, as you said, fit the bill, who first generation who are following a similar strategy, because they want to be actively involved. They take, and similarly in Europe. So I just think that yes, there are more family offices in the West, and we're more familiar with some of them. They're big names now, but the broader message is no one size fits all.
Okay. And probably also there is a concept, or we should have a concept of the intellectual capital which these first generation guys are bringing in, right?
Yeah.
So they still feel probably there is something which they've not monetized yet, they've not fully utilized yet, and which they can bring in with the fresh entrepreneurs.
It's their DNA. Yeah. The DNA is, hey, I've done it this way, and I think that I'm willing to back the next guy who wants to.
Right. So we've talked growth assets, we've talked liquidity practically. So overall, let's get back to the asset allocation strategy, which is your views, various families. Do they follow strategic asset allocation? Do you recommend that, or it's all opportunistic, or how? What is the process? How do you go?
The way we implement this is we absolutely focus on a strategic allocation. I liken that to a business that doesn't have a strategic plan, right? So you don't run your operating business year to year. You don't just go. You have a 3 or 5 year plan. You kind of have some direction. Now you may move tactically within that, saying the environment's good or bad, or there's a specific opportunity. But you have to have a roadmap. And without that roadmap, then I think all you're doing is reacting. And you're just, every day we get calls with 20 different products, and then you're just reacting to a product. But how that fits into your needs is much more important. And so we spend a lot of time with families, explaining the value of strategic allocation, and the fact that actually, and we all know this sitting in this room, asset allocation really accounts for 90% of the variability of returns. So that's a message that you have to keep drilling in, because the instinct for all of us is, did you buy XYZ stock or security that's done well? And you have to really get them to focus on it really, unless you happen to get that one in a lifetime Google pre-IPO, where it really will move the needle. Nothing else should, in a way, move the needle so dramatically, because you have some risk management systems in place that say, I don't want to be so overweight in one instrument, whatever that is.
Sure.
So, I think that process of educating and constantly honing and repeating it is very important, is what we found.
I think I agree to what they're saying. There's absolutely no substitute for the kind of discipline that asset allocation gets, there's always subjectivity in terms of within the asset allocation in terms of product preferences, timing, quantums, but asset allocation is the starting point, and of course it's derived from the philosophy, policy, process steps. But having said that, another important thing also people kind of face that we are a market with very limited assets to choose out of. So there's going to be an asset expansion of sorts as we go into geographies, as we go into sub-asset classes. As Vinay mentioned, there's also a sub-asset class allocation that's kind of very critical and it's getting more and more critical. So that's where the product innovation also kind of gets woven into the asset allocation, and that's where you see a lot of products being thrown at you all the while. But nevertheless, the asset allocation is the rock. There's no way you could ignore that.
So you've already talked about your allocation, and but still
Of course,
give us
you see, asset allocation is a very commonly used, I would say a lot misused, a lot many times. I think anybody who has ever put a step in the financial services side or even started with an MBA, that's the first thing that they hear. It sounds like a jargon which is too overdone. But I agree with Prakash, because what actually I've seen in practical sense is that you've drawn out a plan, but there are lack of opportunities you can actually capitalize on. You might look through the dearth of what is available domestically, of course with the limitations that we have of going internationally. You actually, we really struggle to have alternates which are really, really meaningful. And then alternates automatically goes into your real estate or your gold or those kind of assets which actually are not even liquid as enough.
Absolutely.
So I think there is a lot of product development which is completely required. I think a lot of arbit products kind of keep hitting our desks all points in time. And there's a lot of bandwagon approach in this industry which I have seen. So, we're really looking forward to some innovators.
To the extent when I was in Macau last year, I remember, and within a span of 3 days, we actually, all of us were there. There was something like 60 producers, manufacturers who offered their product, and that's when you realize that we still have a long way to go on the asset expansion itself.
So Neha is coming and standing us, asking us to leave. So we'll just close the session. If you have anything you want to share, last thoughts, then you can just share that. Can we have some questions?
So the first one gets the only chance.
Yeah, there's the first.
There's one right there.
Well, who's getting the chance?
Hello. Hi. I'm Pawan, representing Hexagon Wealth from Bangalore. When it comes to family office, I have one question. In terms of managing the wealth from generation to generation, the perspectives differ, the approach differs, the risk appetite differs. So how do you really manage when it comes from in terms of wealth transferring from generation to generation? Would you really change just because the appetite changed or the perspective changed in terms of asset allocation? Or would you just still take it as a continuation from whatever it has been from the past?
You take that?
So I think it's an approach which is continuously evolving. I think it's very specific to each family, but you will see that in the light of the event coming up, whether it's an education, whether it's marriage, whether it's any of these, a daughter's marriage, a son's marriage, things like that. I think entrepreneurs and families actually think a lot through how they want to handle when the event happens and post that. So managing the family office has to change as per like I said, it's an evolving theory, which has to change as per evolving situations.
Yeah, let me just add to what Binay mentioned. Asset allocation is not constant, while it's a bedrock, and there's something called rebalancing that's the twin side of asset allocation. So I think that answers your question. Every time there's a change in the generational aspirations, expectations, that's bound to happen.
And how easy you find it or how difficult it is to manage the next generation?
No, as long as the overarching philosophy is in place, that's what's going to guide it across those generations. Because remember, these are not generations in isolation. You're talking to the second generation while the first is already around. You're talking to the third generation while the second is still in command. So it's a process which is seamless and very gradual. So it's not like stark, that you finish off with one generation, start another day with the second. Doesn't work like that.
All right,
I
thank you.
think to some degree it also depends on whether the assets are being managed and invested as a pool, or whether they're demarcated for different, by families. Because obviously, if it is at a pool level, then by definition there'll be some level of compromise. Whereas if it is demarcated, then what you'd recommend for a 30-year-old versus an 80-year-old is likely and should be different. So that plays an important role as well.
I guess we are out of time now,
Yeah, sure.
and we'll.
So I'll just quickly call on stage Mr. Aditya Gadke, CEO AIWMI, to felicitate our distinguished panelists for the session.